Welcome. I am very excited to have you here with not just me. I also have a fellow teacher. I'm Laura. David is joining us, and you have not one, you have two AP World History experts at your disposal today. So no matter what's going on, take a deep breath. Get ready to feel better about AP. So you're here for this entire hour. We actually have 2 more hours of prep coming up that you're welcome to join us for. But right now, it's AP World History Modern. We are going to be looking at specific questions that are going to help you to think about your prep, and you're going to be able to take what you learned today and apply it to specifically what's going to help you. So again, my name is Laura. We have David. Please participate in the chat. David's here to help, and I'll be able to see that chat as well. So let me go ahead and get us started. We actually pulled together this presentation with you in mind because we know you're probably at home right now, not quite sure what to do. AP prep, it can be done anytime, but specifically prepping smarter, not harder is something Kaplan's known for. So what we do is we take a look at the material and we decide based on what College Board has told us. College Board is the test maker, so it's a good source of information. What are the high yield content areas? And in particular, for this time period from 1200 to 1450, there are 3 particular high yield content areas that we're going to be looking at today. But it's not just going to be facts, names, dates, people, places. We're going to look at questions. These are test-like questions, and we're going to reflect after you've answered each question. So let's get started right away. This first question, I pulled it from a question set. So I had the privilege of working on the AP World History Modern Prep Plus book. So that means that I've seen these questions before. I know them. I know they're modeled after official test questions, which makes a difference. So looking at this question, this is just one question out of a question set. All of the questions that you're going to see in the multiple choice section, they are stimulus based. So that means that you're going to have a pretty picture, or you're going to have a text, or you're going to have something to use to your advantage. So taking a look at this particular pretty picture, we have a map, and at the very bottom, it says that it depicts canals, those are the light lines, highways, those are the dark lines, built into the early city of Baghdad. Okay, so we've got canals. What else do we have here? If you take a look at this picture, and actually I'm going to go ahead and use my cursor instead, we can see that we have a river. And again, it's the highways and the canals that are going to be super helpful for this question. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at the question, keeping in mind what this particular map is showing. It's showing the infrastructure. So that's just what helps people move around within a city, whether it's a bridge, a canal, and it also has physical features. So it has the river as well. So just taking a look. In just one moment. We are using new technology for this because we want it to broadcast right into your homes. So we are, actually, I'm going to go ahead and unhook this. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to find my cursor. And there we go. All right. So, oh, I see. All right, just a moment. There we go. Here is our question. So I'm going to give you 1 minute so that you can take literally a minute to read this question and answer it. I will be quiet during that time, and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead and look at this question for 1 minute. All right, time's up. So keep in mind that perhaps not, and obviously not everyone works at the same pace, but perhaps you didn't finish the question or you're still thinking about it. You know what's really interesting about this question, and I actually really like this question? Every single answer choice is factually correct. So wait a second. Every single answer choice is correct. Then how is this a question on a test? Well, actually, it has to do specifically with what the question says and what is in the map. So anything you pick out, if you have a map especially, anything you pick out as a correct answer must be directly supported by what information was provided. College Board expects you to think like a historian, and that means that you need to consider primary sources like maps. So for this particular question, the correct answer is indeed A. So if you didn't answer A, you're going to reflect and think, okay, was I tempted because I knew it was true? Do I need to make sure I look at the stimulus? Do I need to make sure I look at the question stem? There are a lot of different ways that you can lead down a path to a trap. And learning about how to get yourself out of there is how you're going to do great on this AP test. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to model test expert-like thinking, and we're going to be practicing with these amazing questions. So before we move on, and actually I'm going to go ahead and clear out that lovely purple slash. It was just there for, just extra fancy. Now that we have this clear, we can clearly see the exam structure. The reason we're talking about this is because this is the first year. This course, AP World History Modern, 2019 is the first year of its rollout. So now in 2020, you're going to be taking the exam. That's actually good news for you. The old exam last year, if you have any friends who took it, it covered a lot of material. 6,000 BCE to the present. That's a lot of stuff. This is 1,200 to the present. Still a lot of stuff, but it's a lot easier for you to remember these different names, people, places, than the entire history of the world. So David and I are both really excited that you get a chance to do this. And then another thing to keep in mind that we want to make sure you consider is that you need to have timing down pat by the time you take your exam. You don't want to be thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to get through the whole thing? You should have taken at least one practice exam. We certainly hope more than one practice exam. And the reason is because, and you'll see with our timing today, in the multiple choice section, you have 1 minute per question. 1 minute per question. That's not counting each stimulus. So it's a pretty quick clip. You'll find with section 1, part B, and section 2, you don't have to move nearly as quickly, but you still want to practice that timing. And that timing is going to help you in addition to all the studying you're going to do. So speaking of studying, here we are, our first high yield content area. Commonalities across dynasties. I know dynasties, it's a hard thing to get excited about. And there's a lot of them. And the question is, do I have to memorize all of them? Well, in the previous course, yes, you did. And actually there was a song for it. There still is. There's a song. This course, it is less important to know each unique feature than it is to know the commonalities among the features of these dynasties, although I will say the song's super catchy, so maybe just learn them anyway. But in general, you want to know how things changed over time and what things stayed the same. And you'll see that with 4 different aspects that did actually stay pretty constant among these 3 dynasties. So Mandate of Heaven, that is something that you should know already. If you don't, go ahead and mark it down. We're going to be studying all the rest of this week, so tomorrow and all next week, so you got plenty of time. This is the only day that we're doing the 1,200 to 1,450. So anything you want to make sure you brush up on, make sure you write that down. Another thing they had in common was the civil service exam system, the bureaucracy. So that's all the organization around the government that they set up. That was very similar among those 3 dynasties. We've got the Grand Canal, and keep this one in mind. There might be a question about it, maybe right after this. So the Grand Canal is something you want to know about and how it affected that particular area within the world. And then religion, always important. And it's important to know that the religion stayed pretty constant throughout these 3 dynasties. So again, the commonalities, the differences, that's what's going to be most important. Oh, look at that. It's like I knew it was coming next. I know, huge surprise. Yeah, so perhaps we're going to answer a question, not just one. We're going to have two questions. I know you're so excited. And it seems like, how could this person sitting right here be that excited about history? You know what I am excited about is you feeling better about answering these questions. So that's why I do get a little bit silly, a little bit excited. But this is all for you. So taking a look at this particular picture, again, we're looking at any man-made features, and that of course would be a canal. And we're looking at the area in particular and how it is actually spread out quite a bit, and yet everything's connected because of a canal. So thinking about that theme within world history and really any history, when you connect places, you're connecting people and languages and goods and services. So thinking about how that helps to unify different areas, and this area in particular is unified from the Grand Canal. All right, so we have another test-like question. I'm going to go ahead and start up a timer again for you. You're going to read the question, pick out an answer, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so, and actually I'm realizing I have you on a different video than before, so I'll make sure I look down here. I'm just checking in with David. All right, so making sure we're all set and everybody can see exactly what I'm seeing. I'm new to this technology, and I'm delighted that Kaplan has brought me in so that I can work with you, because I worked on the book. And so I know a lot about this course, and I'm happy to share it with you. So this question in particular is a great question for us to take a look at. So first I'm gonna reveal the correct answer, because I know you're dying to know what the correct answer is. So the correct answer is A. And one thing to keep in mind, if you can eliminate any answer choice, even just one, it's going to increase your chances of answering a question correctly. So if you're using process of elimination, that's not a bad thing, and that can certainly help you throughout your studies. Okay, so how can you eliminate the incorrect answers in this question? Because perhaps you didn't choose answer choice A, or you're thinking, okay, well, if I chose answer choice A, how do I make sure I do it again when I get a similar question? So anything that doesn't match what the picture is showing, as I mentioned before, isn't going to work. So when you saw for C in particular, increased international trade, they're looking at a specific region within one group of people. So that's not going to make a lot of sense. Then you have industrial technologies, it's the wrong time period. So those are common traps. So if it's from the wrong time period, it can't be the correct answer. That doesn't make any sense. If it's from the wrong region or it's too expensive, like answer choice C, that's not correct. That doesn't make any sense. And then for answer choice D, let's say you're not quite sure, you're thinking, oh my gosh, did it, didn't it? That's not a reason to pick an answer. If you're not sure and there's a better one available, like answer choice A, the correct answer, please pick it. Don't pick something because it's unfamiliar. That is not a good technique, and we're here to tell you that. We've tested it. David and I have looked at so many tests. Really, we're boring people. We love tests. And we can tell you for sure, if you see something and it's unfamiliar, that's not a reason to pick it. We're going to keep moving along with the Grand Canal, and we're going to look at one more question. And for this question in particular, I want you to consider which one, if you think about canals and whether or not they were positive influences, which, and you're going to see the question in just a moment, which situation is most similar? I'm going to go ahead and put the next one up for you. So which situation is most similar? If you use process of elimination for this question, you should give yourself a pat on the back. This is the type of question that, unless you are some sort of magician, and I'm not, and I'm constantly surprised by magicians, you're not going to be able to think of an answer that's going to perfectly match one of the choices. Going through each answer choice is really helpful here. And thinking about canals, as I mentioned before you saw the question, they had a positive impact on different regions. So if you are looking at answer choice A, that's very negative, and so should not be one of your viable options. Answer choice B is really great as an option, so keep that around. And then answer choice C is a tricky one that they like to use. So the Silk Road, while it did include roads, wasn't an actual road somewhere. It was the trade routes. So be careful not to read a word and think, oh, right, road, canal, same thing. Not only that, but B and C both have the word road in them. They can't both be right. So you want to really think about that. And then again, answer choice D, as we saw in the last one, if you see an answer choice and you're like, oh, I don't remember what that is. Oh, maybe that's what it is, because I don't remember it. Again, not the way to go. We promise you, do not use that technique. So not surprisingly, the correct answer is B. So being able to unite people. And the other key component of this is the fact that it was government sponsored. So the Inca road system and the Grand Canal, the governments within those regions were the ones who paid for it and made sure the project went all the way through, organized all the people, all that fun stuff. So that's another component that makes it a fabulous answer choice. All right, we've got 3 questions in. 3 questions. I think we should do some more. But first, we're going to look at our second high yield content area. So here we go, Mongol Empire. Yeah, I feel like people have mentioned this group before. I feel like they're like really famous in history. They are. You really want to know who they are. There are some really cool videos you can watch. You can turn to your book. There's a lot of different resources to go over this very important group of people. And one person in particular, Genghis Khan, really a big deal. We don't know. There's some speculation about all the intricacies of his life because, you know, it was a long time ago. But in particular, you want to know that his big claim to fame is he united people. Another thing to keep in mind is the Mongols were known for how well they waged war. They did a really great job. But as you'll see, they did a great job for only so long. So it was impressive, and they did have a time of peace. So that was a good thing for not only them but also for the people they conquered. So another thing to consider, they're not the only group that had an area of time of peace. So you are going to want to think about that. Maybe there'll be a question about that. So consider how this is the area of the time of peace when a group is able to achieve that after they've conquered people and places. That is a commonality among different topics. Next thing to consider is how that time of peace impacted trade. And that's going to be a common theme, not just with the Mongols, but also with other groups of people. And then finally, all good things must come to an end. And by good things, I mean good for the Mongols, maybe not for everybody else. They were really good at conquering, like really good, not great at administrating. So it's similar to when you go to a buffet and you're like, and I'll have that, and I'll have that, and I'll have that. And then you try to eat it all. It's just not, the coordination is lacking. So you want to consider all of this and how this group of people really mirrors a lot of different groups, but they did certain things in particular that made them famous. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and read this question stem. So again, everything's stimulus based. So we're going to let me give you a minute to read, and then we'll talk about the stimulus, and then it'll be easier to answer the questions. So go ahead and get started. And I apologize. It was different on my screen. It was covering the what you were trying to read. So just a moment. Let's do that again. I'm going to restart it for you. And take 2. There we go. Much better. Sorry about that. All right, so this is a source. The question you're about to see is going to ask about what other source would help you to evaluate the accuracy of this one. So we have to first determine what kind of source this is. There are 2 main types of sources you're using in history class. You have primary and you have secondary sources. David and I already know which one this is, but if you can tell us in the chat, if you want to venture a guess, is this a primary or a secondary source given the person, the mode of communication is the letter, and the time period, 1245. So would this be from a history book, a secondary source, or would this be a personal account, a primary source? And if you're not willing to venture a guess, it's okay, we'll tell you. And you just think it in your head and then see if it matches. Ready? Primary source. Was that what you're thinking? I can totally tell. That was what you were thinking. Well, I know that's what David was thinking because, we just love history. So keep that in mind. This is a primary source, and you're going to go ahead and do the next question knowing that this is a primary source, and this was coming from, and actually I'll go back. This is from someone who witnessed Genghis Khan and the Mongols and sent a letter to the Pope. So think about that. And primary source documents. Yes, awesome. Austin, that's exactly right. Primary. Yep. And I forgot too, there's a little bit of a delay in the chat. So that's another thing to consider. But keep that in mind and pick out an answer for question number 1. We're going to give you 1 minute to do it. You might even need less than that, but go ahead. Awesome. Okay, so I'm happy for a couple of reasons. First thing, my very awesome coworkers helped me fix my camera, so big one on that. And second thing, we get to talk about this question, so it's going awesome for me today. All right, so the reason I love this question is because you don't need to know a specific date, a specific person, or a specific place. You get your points just by thinking like a historian, which is what College Board asks you to do. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal this answer. So the first thing you can do in terms of process of elimination is to get rid of anything that is secondary source and then pick a group of people or a person that is different from the original source. Excuse me. So if you hear something from one friend and you think, okay, that sounds a little strange, you're not going to go ask the person who is standing next to them. You're going to ask somebody else from a different group for their opinion. So that's something to keep in mind and really helpful because the College Board really likes questions like that. So speaking of questions like that one, let's do one more. Go ahead and take a minute and we'll talk about this momentarily. All right, I love it. We've got some answers in the chat. That is a big deal. We really appreciate your participation. It's hard. You're at home. You don't know everybody else in the chat. We appreciate that you went out on a limb. And congratulations. B is correct. So these questions aren't rote memorization. These questions ask you to consider what 2 very separate empires did in a similar fashion. Very different groups of people, but what they did do is they helped people to communicate in ways they couldn't before because they weren't unified, and they were able to improve technology because they had a lot of smart people talking to each other. And the global economic system happens because of trade. Why does trade happen? When you start having empires that are unifying people. B is correct. So awesome work. Really appreciate the participation. Round of applause for you. Our final high yield content area. Now keep in mind, we have 3 high yield content areas, and then I've got some fantastic takeaways for you that are also accompanied by questions. So we're just doing some review and then questions, review and then questions. And I highly recommend that for your own prep. You know yourself best. You have been going to school for a little while now. It's been a hot minute. You know yourself best. So if you know that you need pencil and paper, you know you need Quizlet, if you know you need a Kaplan book, if you know you need your dog to tell, all these facts and amazing things to, use that. So in particular, for this content area, however you want to study it, keep in mind that there are 3 pieces of information you want to know about important travelers, also sometimes called explorers: where they came from, how they were financed, where they went, and then the significance. So the takeaway from all of these different travelers is what happened because they dared to venture out. So those are the key components of travelers. So again, we're meeting tomorrow and all next week. You have plenty of time to study. You don't have to memorize all of this now, but these names should be familiar to you. And then let's see okay, great. We've got information. What does it look like in a question? Well, you know what? It's all stimulus based. So first thing we do, we take a look at this document. So go ahead and take 1 minute to read this document. And I did it too again. I put it over part of the text. So go ahead and take just a little more time to read through it. I apologize. I have 2 different screens. Thank you for being patient with me. All right, so now that you could actually read what was on the screen, well, it's okay. We're learning together. This is a primary source. It's an account. It was translated, so that definitely is something to take note. But it is an account that gives you real world information about this time period. So thinking about the information you gathered here, you're going to take a look, and actually I'll flip screens for you. I'll show you. So this one asked how the second paragraph is best understood. So in the context of which of the following. So take a look at those answer choices, and then I'll go back to the second paragraph for you. So our options here, and this is mirroring what you're going to do when you take the exam. You're going to see a question. It has, what's really nice is College Board does underline that. That's very test-like to tell you where to look. And then we call it a vertical scan. It's way less high-tech than it sounds, but you're looking at the first part of each answer choice. So you've got lingering anger. We have resurgence of Han cultural identity, development of a bill of exchange, and we have promotion of both regional and interregional trade. Regional and interregional trade. So that's just the first part of the left-hand side of all those. It's a vertical scan. Let's see what matches within not the whole thing. They're telling us to look specifically at the second paragraph. So I'm going to go back up and we're going to go back to the second paragraph. We're going to head back over to the question. You're going to pick out an answer. And we have answer choice D. So if you pick something other than D, you want to consider a couple things. So when the stimulus is text, there are additional components you need to consider. Reading comprehension, it seems like obviously you need to read, but being able to understand the primary source documents is really important. So ask yourself, okay, if I didn't answer this correctly, did I not understand the document? If I didn't answer this correctly, was I accidentally looking at the wrong paragraph? If I didn't answer this correctly, was I tempted by a wrong answer trap? What's great about a lot of strong resources, like what we do at Kaplan, we provide answers and explanations. So when you are taking a practice set, and actually, one of my colleagues just mentioned this yesterday, it's quality over quantity. So we would rather you get 5 questions done and thoroughly understand why you answered correctly or incorrectly, and use that knowledge to answer more questions than to just fly through 50 questions. Just doing them, checking it, and seeing if you got them right or wrong, and putting the X or the check mark. I mean, that's a start, but that's not what's going to be most helpful for you because you know yourself best. We have one more question for you in this question set. Go ahead and take a minute to do this next one. All right, it's ready for the reveal. Answer choice D. So reflect again. Did you answer it correctly? If you did, great. Now that seems like that's the end of the road for you for this particular question. You want to know why you got it right, and you got to be honest with yourself. I'm a horrible guesser, so this never happens for me. But I know people who are really good guessers, but it's truly depending on the situation, either a guess because they just like the letter, or it's actually informed by knowledge you're accessing within your brain. So figure that out. Are you accessing prior knowledge, in which case it's not just a guess, it's an educated guess, or did you get it right because you really feel good about it? And keeping track of what you do feel good about so you don't spend time on stuff you know you can do really well on test day. And awesome job, Austin. Yep, it's answer choice D. Perfect. Okay, we've got 2 more questions to do regarding this final high yield content area. And then we're going to look at those 6 takeaways I promised that I would show you. So as we did with those other pretty pictures, we are looking for any physical attributes on this map, as well as any infrastructure. Although this says caravan routes. So you've got to, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Sorry. You've got to consider caravan routes. Okay, what's that look like? Also, what part of the world are you in? Trans-Saharan. Okay, this is not a vacation I would have to sign up for. holy moly, really dry, desert, traveling with the camel. I'm more of a stay inside type of girl. I wouldn't sign up for this, but taking just a moment to consider what is in this map is really going to make a difference for you when you get to the questions. So, another thing you can think about too, and we'll get to this question in just a moment, is are you the type of person who can focus for 55 minutes straight? Or are you somebody who you got to draw your attention back in? I personally cannot concentrate for 55 minutes straight, no matter what my supervisor tells me. So, what I found, especially on a paper and pencil test, or if you even have scratch paper and you're working on a screen, if you just draw something little like a star, maybe a little flower, nothing intricate like a whole castle, that's just going to slow you down. But if you can just draw your attention back in, maybe adjust your posture. If you're studying at home, you can take a sip of water, but being able to just refocus, think about the question at hand. The questions before you've already completed, we're looking at this one. So this one, camels, desert, got it. Ready for the next question that goes with camels, desert, got it, pictures. All right, go ahead. I'm gonna be really aware of where the timer is this time. Ready? I'm totally gonna do it right, I think. Now I don't know where the timer is. It's somewhere. Go ahead. I am timing you. You have 1 minute. Go ahead. You may have heard me typing to David. He was helping me find my timer. I'm very glad he did. The correct answer for this one is A. So again, time for reflection, deciding, did you get the correct answer? Did you fall to the wayside? Were you able to refocus? The conversation about focusing distracted your focus. But this, certainly thinking about the map, this is helpful to consider in terms of what you already know. Do you feel comfortable with this answer, or do you feel like, oh, I only got it from process of elimination? So A is the correct answer. Just take a gut check. Okay, did I feel good about that? Is that what I picked? Did I not pick it? And now I understand why that's the correct answer. And you're going to do that continuously, even for the next question right here. This time I am going to put the timer up because David found it for me because he's awesome. Go ahead and do 1 minute on this question. All right, so this is a question. I always love the questions where it really does remind you of the specific structure of the test and how important it is. So the structure of this test starts with section 1A. That's 55 questions in 55 minutes, all stimulus based. That means that even if you find something correct, if it doesn't reflect what was in the map, it can't be the correct answer. It's just not possible. So for this one, D has to be correct because you're traveling through the desert. I mean, not me, I'm not going to do it. But in particular, that phrase, environmental knowledge, should have shone like a bright star, bringing you in. Come on, this is the correct answer. And when you practice enough and you practice in a cognizant way, you're aware of what type of practice you're doing, the fact that this is a test-like question, that it's stimulus-based, that's going to highlight these patterns of correct answers. So this one, the environmental knowledge, that's the part that should be bringing you in for a landing to the correct answer. So this question in particular is another one that I absolutely love. I know, we're such nerds. All right, here are the key takeaways. So if you were ever to work with a Kaplan book, and we certainly hope you do, you will notice that we try to do a lot of the hard work for you. So we went through, combed through, it's not even kidding, 150 pages from College Board of exactly what is in the course and what's on the exam. And we highlighted for you, just like in correct answers, there's a highlight, that bright light. What parts of this particular time period are really important to understand and will best help you to be successful on this exam. Because you did the work for a whole year. I mean, come on, you want the college credit. If for no other reason than to say, I have the college credit. I mean, you want to be rewarded for all that hard work. So the key takeaways, there are 6 in total. The first one is the spread of religion. This is an interesting one because, like I said before, the course last year and for years before that started at 6000 BCE. And so it included a lot of religion. There's still religion, certainly, from 1200 to present day, but it's not so much about the founding of the religions, but how religions impact political considerations, how the religions impact exploration. You want to know how it is affecting a people at a time, and also what messaging a government's using with religion in mind to help get the buy-in from people. So that's what you need to know about the spread of religion. Empires and decentralized areas. So even if something is not underneath an empire, so the Mongols, super impressive, united a whole bunch of people. Even if there's a decentralized area, there's something going on. It's world history. It's not one spot in the world history. It's the whole thing. So keep that in mind. And then as people move, and we know that's certainly happening from 1200 to 1450 and more so 1450 to 1750, which is tomorrow. So I hope you'll join us for that. You need to understand what it is that they're doing, why they're moving around, and what is the end result. So looking into the other time periods, where does that start to flow into? Our final 3, long distance trade, not surprisingly, huge spike in long distance trade. War, disease, famine, not super fun to talk about, but something to consider. So let's say we're talking about either a conquest or there is some sort of disease. How did that affect the people? So if you see that there aren't as many people to do a certain job, does that mean that they have better bargaining power? In this case, yes. And then economic and political recoveries. So what happens to a government after things go awry, after an empire implodes? What happens after that? It's not like it just stops. People are still there. It keeps going. So you understanding how there was a recovery period and then going on from there. So we're going to put all the pieces together. This is the very first period among the 4 periods. And there's more to come. I mean, the world didn't stop at 1450, you know that. But let's take a look at some more questions with these key takeaways in mind. Another pretty picture. So recognizing immediately that you have land and then you have Trade routes? Nope, voyages. Yeah, so you don't want to make an assumption automatically. If you see dotted lines, you don't want to assume that it was, oh, that's where everyone's trading. No, this is one particular individual, and this is where he went. So we're going to move over to the questions, and you're going to consider which answer is directly supported by the map. They're not disconnected. It's not just, oh, a nice picture, and then here's a question. They must be connected. So I'm going to give you 1 minute for that. David found my timer, and I'm not going to cover it up this time. You may get started. All right. So you got to play the game. It's like the Sesame Street game. Which one of the things doesn't belong? In this case, it's which one of these things does for sure, definitely 100% belong. You need the right group of people. You need the right idea. It has to be supported by the map. What is the one that's going to work? It is A. So you've got the right group of people. So I said those weren't trading routes. That was one person. But why was he doing all that? To see if they could incorporate trading routes, so that they can get their tributary system and then also more of an interregional system going on, so they can interact with more people. One final question. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to answer this final question. This question has a whole story to it, and it includes the fact that in 1433, these voyages ended, and then Portugal sort of took over this business. So this does require information that you should have learned already. If this does not look familiar to you, that's okay. You have time to study. In fact, you probably have more time than you thought you would have to study. So we went through, that was our goal today, to go through test-like questions, have you consider how you're doing on these questions and what you need to study more, and also to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We put this together because we knew that you'd want to know how you're doing in AP. Even if everything else in your life is really stressful right now, you can come and de-stress with us. We will be here to help you. We have 2 more sessions coming up today, and then we have AP World History running tomorrow and all next week. It was a true pleasure to work with you all. I really appreciate your participation. I'm actually gonna stop sharing my screen. Oops, if I can. And get ready for the next person. Let's see. And then, oh, here it is. Perfect. I think. Yep. Awesome. All right. Thanks again so much. We really had a great time. David and I are big nerds and hope that you will come back and hang out with us. We really did have a wonderful time.
Hi, welcome to U.S. history. So we just finished a great session of world history with Laura. And now we're going to do an hour of U.S. history with me. I'm David, and my off-camera teacher helper is going to be Heather. She is awesome, and you can ask her questions, and she'll help you out. One of the best things, we want you guys to be a part of it. Talk to us in the chat, answer questions. We're going to have questions. We're going to have timers, all of that. And so this is going to be cool. We're going to talk about U.S. history. Go ahead and tell me in the chat, what is your favorite era of U.S. history? What is your favorite era of U.S. history? Because, we all have a different one that you like, learning about. Like personally, I detested the Old West, studying that time. Also, not early 1900s, not my favorite. But anyway, tell me what you think. What do you guys like? What is your favorite era as well? While we're doing that, I'm gonna pull my screen up so we can get rolling with stuff. All right. So we're gonna have fun today. We're gonna be talking about the early years, things that just, when things were first getting started. So Gilded Age, early 20th century, like Gatsby and all that stuff, yeah, the Roaring 20s. So that's cool that you like that stuff. I'm not as huge of a fan of that era, but it's okay because you can be, and it's perfectly fine. We're okay with that. So we're gonna have a good time. I said that already, but I really feel it deep in my bones. So what are we gonna cover today? We're gonna talk about the Europeans coming over. We're gonna talk about slavery and the triangular trade. Now, I didn't say we're gonna be talking about happy topics today. In fact, these are some of the worst. But we have to still cover them because they still are on the test and they are high point values. So basically our course that we have is broken down into 8 main need to know topics. Everything we're going over today comes from this book, our AP US History prep book that just came out this year. And so it breaks things down. There's 8 main topics that have been identified that you need to know. And so these are the first 2. They're unpleasant. The thing is that we have to remember to see history through the eyes of who was living in that time. And in that time, those decisions had been made. We don't have to like them. We just have to know about them. And so we want to make sure that we still study and everything, and that the information that we answer on the test is based on the historical evidence that we have been given. Opinion, unfortunately, doesn't really go into it. So these are the 8 topics that we cover. And you can see we're doing the first 2 today, and then we're doing 1 every other day. Like for tomorrow, we're going to cover Congress, Confederation, and Constitution. And then next week, we're doing 1 a day all week, Monday through Friday at the same exact time. And so this is going to be our fun time together. So today, let's get started on the Europeans in America. Pre-1492, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. There were millions of American Indians, diverse societies, tons of languages. Also, there's a really good book if you're into this particular era of history. There's a really good book called 1491 that is kind of like trying to look and see what did the Americas look like before the Europeans showed up. Very enlightening, very, very enlightening. Then also the New York Times did a really nice series of articles about the 400th anniversary of the slave trade, not a celebration, but like just acknowledging it. And it had some really, really interesting stuff in there as well. If you're just wanting to study as you're home, you can look at some of that stuff and that might be interesting to you. But the natives, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, they were not all nomads. They were not, you know, crazy and all of the things that the Europeans labeled them with, savages. That was not the actual case. And they had societies that had structure, and a lot of them were permanent. And so that's that's the reality of what was coming. Most of the stuff that actually came that we know was like basically propaganda that the Europeans were spreading. But in the 1500s, there became like this war between the different, not a real war, but like a race. It's a race. There was a race between these different countries, France, Spain, Portugal, England, and the Netherlands, to start exploring the New World. So why did they explore the New World? This is something that you want to make sure that you know the list of why. Anyone remember what some of the reasons were? You can tell me that in the chat if you do. Why in the world they would be coming all the way over here to just, I mean, was it just for fun, for the adventure of it all? Some of it may have been, but there were other things as well. And one was travel. I mean, they knew Asia. They knew Asia. They knew there was a land route to Asia, but they're like, is there a different way? Because, you know, it would be a lot better if we could sail to Asia and not have to walk through and travel through all of these other dangerous places. I mean, yeah, I can sell things along the way, but I also might get robbed. And so, yeah, so Brooke just mentioned that, the sea route to Asia, yeah, that's it. Trying to find it. Mali gained territory and wanting power. Yeah, that's going to be another one that pops up here. Northwest Passage was another way that they were looking for a route, maybe across the land, but the other way, like going over. Trade, they wanted to get more things. They wanted to be able to sell more things, and getting the resources, definitely. The search for wealth, gaining that territory, like Molly is saying, is important because the more territory you have, the more powerful you look, but also the more resources you're pulling in. If you think about it, that's like, man, all of a sudden I'm able to get gold and the silver and tobacco and wood and all this stuff that I didn't have access to. I mean, you look at the countries that are sending people, they're not all like large. I mean, you've got the UK and Netherlands and Portugal, they're smaller. And so they could use a new resource place to come, you know, get stuff. Civilize and convert, that's going to be Spain. It's like Spain, that was one of their big things, was like, we're going to civilize everybody, we're going to convert them to Catholicism. And so if you ever see that, civilize and convert, you know immediately that they're talking about Spain. And then some of them were just, people wanted to go live there. They just wanted to live there, you know. And so that's going to be the ones who came over for a permanent thing, that they were escaping prejudice or persecution or whatever. So here we go. We've got 5 documents. One of the big things is that they ask about documents. You've got to know about documents, and there also are going to be questions involving documents. And so knowing the documents is going to be helpful. I know in our book we cover a lot of them so that you will know just, you know, all of them. But this is 5 in particular. I'm going to actually run a 5-minute timer, and I'm going to a 5-minute. No, I'm not. That's a lie. It's a dirty lie. I'm going to run a 1-minute timer, and let you guys see if you can match these up. You know, you can jot them down or whatever, or you can put them in the chat when you do it. That's fine too. And then we'll kind of look at them together. So let me give you a minute and have fun. Alrighty. We have reached 0. So we're going to look at these and you can check off as we go through. So fundamental orders of Connecticut. Fundamental orders of Connecticut. This is going to be called for the power of government from the governed. And so you did not need to be church members. So that was what made this unique. Basically, what you should do with these documents is try to find was there one single thing that kind of made it stand out to where you can remember that better. So like kind of catch the gist of it, the one thing that makes it a little bit unique. Fundamental constitutions of Carolina. I actually live in Carolina. I live in South Kakalaki. And when I think of Carolina, both in futuristic post-apocalyptic books and in old books, agriculture is one of the big things, swamps and agriculture. And so this is going to be that feudal society with nobles, serfs, and slaves. Noble, serfs, feudal, yeah, it's working everywhere else. It's been a big hit other places. So let's go ahead and put that in the Carolinas. The body of liberties. Liberties. Anything that when you're looking at that, probably a good option is that there's going to be about what people are allowed to do. But they're not allowed to do blasphemy or witchcraft. So they are allowed to do some stuff, but there is apparently a limit to just how much the body of liberties could take. Mayflower Compact, Mayflower Moving Company. They were the first to move in, therefore the first written form of government. Since they were the first, they had to have something. And then the last one, the Charter of Liberties. So this is different than the body of liberties. We now have the Charter of Liberties and Privileges. This is going to include mandatory elections, male property owners, and freemen could vote. This is, this is pretty normal for a lot of those things, is the whole male part. And freemen could also vote. All right. So one of the very common question types on the test is going to be where they give you a primary source and you have to read it and then you have to answer questions about it. And so the multiple choice, which is this is a part of multiple choice, you have an average of a minute per question. It's like, yeah, that's great, but I can't do that all the time because sometimes I have to read these things. And so your guide is not just to run a minute timer per question. You want to get the questions done as quickly as you can so you have time to read things like this. And so like this has a passage and 2 questions. So that's 2 minutes. I would probably say, let's take 2 minutes to go and read this and then do both questions. So that's kind of like how you would do it on test day, is like if you're just trying to time yourself, is like, okay, I'll get all of this done in 2 minutes. The other thing though is that these passages do not always have where the answers have to come out of. Sometimes they don't come out of them. Sometimes it's just referencing a particular time period or something like that. And so then the questions will be tied to it, but the answers won't necessarily come out of it. And so you kind of, don't waste a ton of time reading if you look at the questions and they both are ones you could answer without it. So, all right, so here we go. This is the passage. I'm actually going to give you guys a minute to look at this one. And then we're going to have a couple questions that we're going to talk about. And so go ahead and let me get the timer reset for a minute. And you can go for it. So not the prettiest of pictures, not the happiest thing that you could possibly write about. This De La Casas is definitely not pro Spain, not happy with how this is done. He's saying, I don't know how you can possibly think that what you're doing is okay. This is awful. This is not a good thing. And so definitely want to take that into account when we are thinking about what questions may come into play. It's not bad as far as like, coming up with some basic like summation of the thing, which is, okay, this is not good. And then you kind of can like see how to deal with the questions. So like this one right here, looking at question 1, if you go back to the passage, it doesn't mention any of these things. And so this is one of those questions where it's just kind of referencing that time period or what they're talking about. And so this is where our general knowledge would have to come in. And so go ahead and figure out, number 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 30 seconds for each question, kind of like what we said, 2 minutes for like the passage and the 2 questions. So do 30 seconds and tell us in the chat what one you think it is. And then we'll talk about that. Okie dokie. That is 30 seconds. It's pretty quick, but I mean, thinking about the top question types, it's not math. We're not working it out. It's not science. We're not working it out. Something like this, it's like, do you know it or not? Can you go back and find it or not? And so timing, if you don't, that's a goal to have too, is to make sure you're moving quickly. If there's a question that you're just like, I don't know what that is, I wouldn't spend a ton of time answering it. I would pick a letter and move on, because it's not going to benefit you to sit there and stare at the wall trying to figure it out. The teacher's covered up all the posters, and so you can't do that. And besides, you may be home for this test, and I don't think you have the answers to it on the wall either. And so in this particular case, it is going to be the encomienda system is what they are talking about. The encomienda system. Hacienda system developed from the encomienda system. And then the encomienda system is basically them taking lands and saying, oh, but you can stay here and work on it. Well, thanks. And so that's kind of what went on there. And that's what De La Casas is angry about, is criticizing. And then number 2 is asking us about De La Casas specifically. What about him on his own? And so go ahead and think that over. What is he best known for? And then we'll talk about that. Okay, so De La Casas. Now here's the thing. There is a powerful, powerful tool that you have at your disposal. It's on your disposal for every standardized test. And it's something that we really encourage our students to use. And that is elimination. Elimination. Elimination is a very, very powerful thing. On your test day tool belt, that should be one of your go-to tools. It's like the Phillips head screwdriver of your tool belt. You're going to use it a lot. Even if I don't know this clown at all, I still could get this answer just by eliminating my way to it. Okay, so let's look at these answer choices and see, can we eliminate some of the answer choices? advocating for the forceful conversion of indigenous people. We just read him angry about that. So that's not what he's doing. So B is out of there. Suppressing native people. Again, no. So now it comes down to A and D. So now you have a 50-50 choice, even if you didn't know anything about this guy, because just from reading his passage, you'll know he does not do B or C. So there is speaking out or starting missions. Which one of those, think? Which one of those is going to be more time intensive and all of that? Do we remember? I mean, starting missions, that's a pretty big deal. Speaking out is also a big deal, but it's not like sitting, you have to be there for a while to do these things. And he didn't build missions, but he did speak out against the atrocities. And so that's where I'm going to head. It's going to be answer choice A. D is too far. He's doing too much because he wasn't actually involved in building anything. So I mean, that you could narrow it down to A and D right there, and then pick between the two. And hopefully you'd pick A. If it was 50-50, you would pick one of them, obviously. But A, maybe you could do that because the other one just seemed like I would have heard of him better if he had done a lot of these things. So moving to need to know concept number 2. So the first, you can see 1 and 2 kind of bleed into each other. No pun intended, but it could definitely be one. But they merge together. Early European colonization and the slave and triangular trade. So in 1620, the first ever slave ship appeared off the coast of the New World. That's the thing I mentioned from the New York Times it's involved in talking about this. And that is when it first began. That's where that first happened. Originally, Brazil and the West Indies were going to be more of the target for those slave ships. The North America, it took them a while to do it because they didn't need them at first. This triangle that they're talking about, this triangle of trade, you're going to see raw materials are going from the United States, from North America, and they weren't the United States at that time, from North America to Europe. So they're getting all those the resources, the raw materials that they were wanting so badly. Then Europe is going to put all of that into their manufacturing system, and that's going to head down into Africa, where it's going to have a whole new place to buy things, a whole new group of people to buy from you. And then the slaves are going to come from Africa and head over, and it's just going to keep going, making this triangle. So knowing what goes where, again, think of it like resources, goods, people, like that. It just, even if you just did that, to remember the 3 legs of the triangle. In 1793, you had the invention of the cotton gin, that fertile southern land, the warm climate that lets you grow things almost all year. King Cotton becomes the driving force, and these plantation system develops. And so it's not, now all of a sudden there is a huge market, a huge need for slaves in the South, in North America. And so they start purchasing them in mass, and it completely changes the economy and everything. One of the, just so you, thinking about this, because they do ask about economy and they do ask about like how things tie together. That's one of the big things on this test, is like the threads and how one event leads to one event leads to one event. And they could ask you like, how were women approached in this era versus this era versus this era versus this era, or minorities, how they were dealt with in each of the eras. And so understanding the big themes, the big threads, is going to be very important for questions, especially those short answer ones in the essays. And so one of the reasons that North America was able to grow so quickly, one of the reasons the United States was able to grow so quickly was that they did not have one of the production costs that Europe had in that labor. Europe was paying their workers, the South was not. And so the United States was able to produce and all of this stuff because they had no labor costs in the South. And so that's horrible. And but it also is like, one of the things about history to understand is how that actually happened. And so as an entire economy is built on that, the slave trade, the existence of slavery, that's why the South is going to be so, stubborn about doing away with it, because they're like, "Oh, we're going to lose all our entire workforce, in addition to the mindset that they had at that time, which was horrific as well." So we got another one of these matching things. We're going to give you a minute to look at it and find the different colonies and then match them to your exports, and then we'll discuss what those are after your minute. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start it now. Nope, that was 30 seconds. Yeah, I'm not going to do a minute, not 30 seconds. There we go. Minute is up. You don't have to worry about this being like a test-like question where you have to, "I have a minute to do these." These aren't on the test. They may, but they may say, "Which of the following do the middle colonies export?" And then you would get those four answers, and you'd have to pick the right one. So we've got the middle colonies, southern Chesapeake, New England. Middle colonies, that's going to be stuff like grains, cereal crops, wheat, like still are there. And then the southern colonies, you're going to have a variety of things, because remember we did have, they did say, very rich soil, also cotton. That's not listed because it would have been a giveaway. And so but there also were other crops being raised there. Chesapeake, this is going to be like Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland. As soon as you say the Virginia, North Carolina, you should think of tobacco, tobacco, tobacco. And then that leaves New England through elimination: fish, furs, lumber, and Tom Brady. And so that is going to be the main exports that are going on with those areas. Okay, so we've got another question here, number 3. So why did slavery come to existence and then grow in British North America? Especially if you take into account that Britain had outlawed it. So think about what it could be, and we're going to give you a minute to work on that one. And tell us in the chat what you think it is. What is the reason for it? Which letter? Sorry about the slide jumping back. The computer really liked that one. So slavery, why did slavery evolve in British North America? And again, um, we can do some elimination if we need to. We can do some elimination if we need to. So slaves were brought with the first settlers. No, they weren't. The settlers barely made it. They weren't going to bring anyone else with them. That was not going to happen. So not A. Slavery was developed after the deaths of thousands of enslaved American Indians. That would mean that the thousands of American Indians had been the workers prior, which was not really the case. I mean, we talked about the encomienda system where that did happen, but that was not the British North America. So it's not going to be B. C, Anglican Church actively encouraged the transport. No, the church didn't encourage that. Because remember, it's illegal in England. So it's not going to be that. Which leaves us, the only other option is D, but that is the correct option because originally most of the workers were indentured servants working off debts. That was one of the reasons people would come, was that they could work off their debt and then get to be able to go buy land and all that stuff on their own. And that's one of the reasons that slavery did not start immediately in North America, was that there already was a workforce. And so when the workforce disappeared, they had to start filling it in somewhere because they didn't want to pay for workers. That's the thing. When it was indentured servants, they weren't paying for it. And then when it was slaves, they weren't paying for it. And so they were never planning on paying for it. And so that's why slavery evolved. All right, number 4. Let's look at number 4 together. I want you to think about something when we look at this. Which of the following colonies initially banned the practice of slavery? Well, pay attention to the wording. I don't want to give it away, but I just pay attention to the wording as you're answering it. We'll give you another minute and put your answer into our chat and let us know what you think it is. Okay, our minute is up. Brooke, you made the exact deduction that I wanted you to make. Which of the following colonies initially banned the practice of slavery? So this is why we tell you to read every single word in questions, because that's going to make me think, wait a minute, it's not, is that saying that they did it at first and then they didn't do it anymore? The North, it's banned and it's banned, and so once it's banned, it's gone. And so they didn't, some of them went from allowing it to not allowing it, but who went from not allowing it to allowing it? So immediately, just like Brooke was saying, I'm gonna knock Massachusetts and New York out of there. It's either Georgia or Virginia. So then I'm gonna think, what was the way these colonies started? Who ran them? Things like that. Virginia, they had slaves really early on. Okay. Georgia, though, remember, these were prisoners. Remember, Georgia was a prison colony, or at least part of it was. And so it's not, they don't need those workers. In fact, they having slaves there actually could be counterproductive to what Georgia was trying to do. And so that's going to be why C is the correct answer, is that they they didn't allow it at first. And so that initially gives us such a big clue. That's awesome that that helped. Okay, so let's actually switch on over. We actually have some extra questions that we're going to go through. We've got some from our directly from our book actually, which is pretty awesome. So here is our this is a direct. These are actually this is a PDF of our actual book. We're actually taking you through this. One of the things I wanted to show you is this long question type. We did a lot of multiple choice. Well, let's look and see what the actual essay type thing would be. So you'd get a prompt, kind of like what we've got here on screen. And here is hold on, I think I've got, look. Sorry. Crazy computer guy, stop scan. You're gonna make us sick. Here we go. Okay, so evaluate the extent to which the migration of European colonists and the resulting encounters with American Indians affected social patterns. So this is one of the things that we want to talk about, is like finding exactly what they're wanting us to do, social patterns. So that's going to be our goal. We're not talking necessarily about economy. We're not talking necessarily about military. We're talking about social patterns. So we're going to, a little bit more of how the people were living is what we're focusing on. How did that affect, I mean, it could be culture, it could be the sense of community. I mean, there's a lot of different things that fall under social patterns. And it's, but it's going to be a lot, it's going to be more than just some of the basic things that we might think about. So how did that affect social patterns in that period? So one of the things that you need to do is look at the prompt and make sure you're answering everything they're wanting you to answer. And then you want to come up with what is my answer? I need to come up with an answer. So let me think about what my answer would be. Now you've got several different countries you could pick from. You could pick Spanish, French, and British, like the answer choice, like the thesis says. Or you could, you have Portugal, you have the Netherlands. You can, so you have different options. And in this case, the person writing this picked Spanish, French, and British. Okay, so how did those territories do that? And I cannot urge you enough to outline. Does anyone hate outlining? Does anybody like an outline phobe? Like, I don't want to do that. It's weird, Heather. It's weird because I see a lot of students that feel that way, and they're like, I don't want to do an outline. It takes too long. But the thing is that it takes a really long time to be, meandering around too. And so I had a student one time who she really struggled with essays, and as she was, as we were working through things, we tried to get her to outline and all of that. Her final essay that I worked with her, I thought she had it. Like, I was reading the opening and the first paragraph, and I was like, oh man, finally everything came together. That second paragraph, there was this example she used that I don't know where she was going with it. I don't think she knew where she was going with it. And so she spent the next paragraph and a half explaining why she used that example and how it fit in. And then the time ran out, and that was basically the end. And I was like, you didn't outline, did you? And she's like, no. Outlining can avoid that, because you can sit there and look at it and go, that's not really good. But the problem that comes into our minds a lot of times is this stream of consciousness where I'm just going to write what comes in my head. I'll organize it in my head and then I'll write it. Then you start repeating things, making generalizations, choosing poor examples. outlines are the way to go. You've got to outline. When I'm not teaching and hanging out with my kids and all that, I also do write. And I mean, I've got to outline. That's one of the things I'm finding as I'm working on a book that I'm working on. I have a huge, it's on the computer, so it's as big as my monitor, but it's like this big board with just cards all over it, virtual cards, showing characters, plot, all of this stuff, so I can keep track of everything. So always outline. And in this case, this person did each country, goals, methods, results. And so you're going to see that benefit of knowing those different territories and their different motivations. You can put that in there, come up with strong examples, and then you'll have a really strong essay. Never, ever leave off a conclusion. Sorry. Again, it's jumped. Never leave off a conclusion. That's the last thing they're going to read. You don't want it to stink at the end. So, if you, I mean, in our book, that if you get the book, it's got this like high scoring response. You can read and see exactly kind of like what you would be going for if you're wanting a really highly scored essay, which you would want because it, contributes to your test. You can read it and see, oh, that's what I should have, And the nice thing is like if you're reading this, it's not like the person is like talking near there, and then therefore and anti-disestablishmentarianism and all these big words. That's not happening. It's just written well and organized, and that's going to be what they're looking for. Plus, the book will also, as you can see, it has like the rubric for how it gets graded, and so you can check that out. One thing I wanted to show you today before it's like, whoa, we're going crazy. Before we got into some questions, I wanted to show you something that may be encouraging to you. So here's the thing. I have a senior, I have a sophomore. And so they're and a sixth grader. I didn't forget the sixth grader. It didn't apply to him because he's not in high school. This whole thing that's going on, it sucks. It really does. I know it's like, even as much as people don't like school, you'd rather be at school, and it's awesome that you get some extra time to study, but it's thanks. You're missing out on stuff. My senior is just like heartbroken. It's terrible. But there still are things that you can do and to get ready. The College Board is going to do the tests somehow. We're supposed to find out tomorrow, kind of like what they're planning. They said March 20th, so they're going to give us more information. So we'll find out tomorrow what exactly they're going to do, but they've said all along, we're going to make sure you get the credit for the classes, you have the opportunity to take the tests. So I don't know how it's going to look, but it's going to look like something. But like you can see, 2 month, 1 month, 2 week, this little thing that this cut up, you can, if you whatever one you would follow, you can see like how much work you need to put in if you're 2 weeks out, 1 month out, 2 months out. And so no matter how close you get, there's actually a way to improve. And so that's pretty nifty, coming up with a study plan. That this is just a really cool resource that is in the book. And like it even shows you what you should be studying each day and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure that you guys saw that, and I want to try to show it each day so that people can like screenshot it or something, so that they can follow along. And like, man, it's even though things are not going the way I want them to, there are still things I can do to finish the year well and get a good grade on these tests. So Carlos, that's one of the things obviously they're thinking about. I have no idea. I don't know how they're going to get around that. because immediately if you say you can take it at home, then, you know, people are going to find a way to not behave. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. But they have said all along that they are planning on making sure that people are able to take the test and get the credits. You know, my oldest, my senior, he does those as well, and so he's got a couple of AP classes that he's wanting to take his stuff on because he wants to get credit for it when he goes to college next year. All right. So before we go, let's do a couple of. Sorry, I just was getting to the right point here. Let's just do a couple extra questions. We've got some extra ones here. These, like I said, these are directly out of our book. So take. I'm going to give you a minute to read the little passage here by Senator Cochran, and then we'll look. I'll give you 30 seconds for each question, just like we did earlier. Okay. So let's go for it. Senator Cochran seems like a groovy guy. What? What? This is terrible. This is that propaganda machine that they were coming up with these ideas of what the people look like over here. The blatant racism, prejudice, awful, terrible. But this is what, you know, the mindset was. And he was basically, he's praising Columbus. He's saying the old world with its prejudices and barbarism, basically, you know, the whole that the natives were savages and never could be trusted. They couldn't have possibly brought such a powerful, amazing thing here. What? Awful, terrible, terrible guy. I don't even know Senator Cochran, and I don't like him. So that's going to be something that you're going to have in your mind as you look at the questions. So again, let me give you 30 seconds to answer 4, and then we'll do 5, and then we'll do 6, and then we'll be done for the day. So number 4. All right, 30 seconds in. Here we go. Which of the following most directly? Guys, remember what we said. Read the question. There's clues in the question. This is what we got to pay attention to most directly. Most directly. That's not working. Hang on a second. Redraw my pen. There we go. Most directly. All of them could, when you see something like that, all 4 answers could have caused that trend or helped to cause that trend. But we're asking for the one that most directly caused the trend. And then when we do that, it's going to be answer choice D. Answer choice D, that most directly did it. A, yeah, that A plays into D. But was that as common? No, that was one type of way that the diseases hit. There was also a lot of unintentional spread. And so that's the thing to think about. D is more general. A is so specific. That's not going to be the most direct thing. All right. Another 30 seconds for number 5. Go for it. Okay, so this one says during the period of cultural exchange, American Indian societies were most significantly, hey, there it is again, most significantly. So not just impacted, but most significantly impacted. And the beavers, they were there. They were already planting. The horses and sheep, this is what ends up being the biggest impact because that changed the way they hunted, that changed the way that they were able to explore and travel, and it made them more nomadic, actually. And so that was the biggest introduction, was going to be the horses and sheep. So good job, good job. One more, one more. Let's do number 6 together, and then we'll talk about it. All right, last one, number 6. Which of the following represents the largest population flow? Largest population flow. Again, all of them are going to be population flows, but which of them is the largest flow? I mean, going through again, eliminating immigration, they both, yeah, they brought people, but you're thinking of the number of people on each ship kind of thing. Versus the migration of American Indian tribes, that also is a very large group, but it does not compare to the number of people who were involved in the slave trade, the number of them. Because I mean, think about it, by the time the Civil War rolls around, the population is over half Black. And so those ships had hundreds and hundreds of people in them. And so they're going to be the ones that are bringing the most people, moving the most people, is going to be that particular process. All right. So that's how we end it. Tomorrow we're going to be back. Tomorrow we get to talk about the birth of the nation kind of thing, and our first 2 little historical figures that you might see on the right of your screen will play a role in that. So I've had a great time. I love history. I love talking about it, love teaching it. Thanks for hanging out with us and participating in the chat. Thank you, Heather, for being in there answering and guiding and all of that. And at the top of the hour, we're going to be doing biology. So have a good afternoon, and then I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ari, and we are ready to get started with our AP Bio review session. I'm so excited. Joining me is going to be Nick. He will be off camera, ready to answer your questions, give you some little recaps. I would love to encourage you all to come back to our sessions. We're going to be running them today, tomorrow, and then Monday through Friday next week as well. So the same time, same kind of like topics, not topics, but like same sort of like tests. So we're going to do AP World History, and then we're going to do AP US History, and then we're going to do AP Bio. And so yeah, please come back, ask your friends to join on in. These are all like just like fun review sessions on some questions. And I'm not sure, Akshara, whether there will be more than what we've currently got planned, but currently just for right now, that's what we know. But stay tuned. Maybe we will have some more coming up in the future. Yeah, I know, Brooke, we gotcha, we gotcha. You know, there are a lot of resources out there, but if we do see a lot of interest in these sessions, I feel like we could probably persuade some important people out there to offer more of these. So I would love it if we did more of them. These are super fun. So team, I do encourage anyone who is just watching right now but isn't able to comment in, create a really quick YouTube account and then come join us on the chat. Now, you know, I really want this to be a safe space. I don't want you to feel like, you know, you have to be able to answer the questions with the right answer. It's so not the intent. And even if you're just like, maybe I'll just answer out loud, like don't bother typing, please do so. The more engaged and active you are in your learning process, the better this time will be for everyone. So I want you to make good use of your time. It's a weird thing. If you are relatively new to online learning, one of the big issues is that it's pretty distracting being on your computer and having your phone around and nobody actually watching you to do this. So do your best to set that time aside, you know, create a space so that it's nice and quiet and you're able to you know, pay attention and be involved here. So yeah, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and do my little share. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you guys all see my screen. So go ahead and give me a yes or a bio or something in the chat if you can see my big purple screen with the AP biology and the topics we're going to be covering for today, biological molecules, and we're going to cover origins of life as well. So I'm just going to wait and hang a moment, make sure that you guys all can see what I am seeing. One of the things that you will notice if you've been using some of the Kaplan books before, these questions are actually pulled from the AP Bio prep book. But you know, it's a nice thing to not just do questions, but to be able to walk through them on your own. Yay, Sharon, Nicole, excellent. I'm excited. Okay, so we're gonna get started. But yeah, you know, talking through questions, doing a little bit of digging into the content review is always really nice to engage the knowledge, to be able to kind of like ask your questions in the moment. So please go ahead and do so. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so the objectives in this lesson, we're going to tackle questions in free energy and loving systems. And then we're also going to do a little bit of Darwinianism and natural selection. So first up, some questions, and I'm not teaching these content topics, to be clear. What I've done is selected some questions from these content areas, and then in the context of going through the questions, we're going to just do a little bit of a discussion of the content necessary in order to answer the question. We're going to also kind of ease in some strategy, like what do you do when you have a huge question stem? How do you analyze a graph? What are parts of the diagram you want to pay attention to? So it'll be kind of like an all-in-one session. It'll be great. Okay. So moving on, let's take a look at our very first question. All of the questions that I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you time to tackle a little bit on your own. So what I'm going to do is pull up a timer for 1 minute, and I want you to grab a piece of paper and I want you to write down whatever notes you need, as well as the correct answer to the question. And then when after a minute, we're going to come back and discuss it together. Okay, so take 1 minute to do this question all on your own. Okay, team, come on back. That was 1 minute for this question. So this question is asking about the diagram that is currently on screen, but not the whole diagram. It's asking about just one part of this. So just this part alone. So the first thing you want to do before you head right into the answer choices, don't like splurge right in. I want you to take a look and consider, what is this thing talking about? The animals and then the plants, you see the arrows kind of going in the upward direction towards CO2. So clearly this is some form of CO2 being given off. Other than that though, like I'm sure you've seen variations of diagram or maybe even this direct diagram before. And it's just talking about like life cycles and some of the macromolecules involved in these processes. But all you need to pay attention to is something that is going to result in CO2 being given off, okay? So that's it. That's all you want to keep in mind. And then let's take a look at our answer choices. Our first one says A, organic matter is broken down into simpler molecules by microorganisms. Now, CO2, if you were to think about this, well, when we respire, when we give off CO2, that is the ultimate result of, us breaking down, other macromolecules like glucose or even lipids. So that part looks okay. Organic matter being broken down into simpler molecules seems to fit. But is this about microorganisms? No, I mean, the process by A is animals going to CO2. So this is referring to a wrong part of the diagram. This is what I like to classify as a faulty use of detail. It is a true fact. It is a true fact. Organic matter is definitely broken down into simpler molecules by microorganisms, but is not answering the question. So just because it's true doesn't mean it is correct. A is not the correct answer. Next up, we have B, carbon dioxide reacting with water to produce glucose. That sounds like a familiar thing. Go ahead and tell me in the public chat, what is this referring to? CO2 and H2O. I'm not going to balance this guy, but hopefully as I'm drawing out, you're like, oh, I've totally seen that before. Feel like there are things around me, maybe not myself, I don't use CO2, but there are things around me that does use CO2 and water to create that yummy glucose that we will probably ingest later on. So if you are thinking, sounds like a plant, then you are absolutely correct. And it is the opposite, essentially, of what this answer choice is looking for. So B is also out because that is the wrong process. Another true fact though, but it is not correct. Yeah, Burl, photosynthesis is kind of what I was thinking as well. You got it, extra as well. Good. So C, organic matter from the remains of dead animals is converted by extreme pressures into coal and oil. Okay, well, I mean, I can recognize that from the diagram as well. Like down here, we got dead organisms, we got pressure and time, creates fossil fuels that we burn. So again, another true fact from the diagram, but it is not the right part of the diagram. So C is out. So let's take a look at our remaining must be true answer and verify that this is correct. Nutrients inside a cell, such as glucose, is converted into usable forms of energy, such as ATP. Totally true. We use glucose, we convert it into usable forms of energy like ATP. Now, it has nothing, at least on surface, to do with CO2. Like our prediction had to do with something with the production of CO2, but like, let's think about that. We already actually kind of discussed it, but if you were stuck on this question because you're like, nothing is showing me CO2 that is in the right direction, well, D is kind of a sneaky way into that, right? Glucose, which is essentially C6, I had the right letter, C6H12O6, reacting with oxygen, will produce things like CO2 and H2O. And in the process of this, it is also going to give us some good old ATP. This is in the right process. It's not explicitly saying that it is giving us CO2, but it is a necessary kind of background content knowledge in order for you to be able to pick answer choice D as the correct match to question 1. So do you need to know a lot of content in this question? Was there a lot of content in this question? Not really. Not really. I mean, if you know the general processes of, macromolecule being broken down, like glucose giving us CO2, if you knew the reverse process by which plants do that, and you were able to read the diagram, that's really all you needed to know. The hard part about a lot of the AP Bio questions is like wading through all the fluff and not getting trapped by true statements that are not answering the question, okay? So we're going to see more of that in subsequent questions, but I want you to keep that in mind. Don't get trapped by true statements. Here's another really big question. It's kind of on the same theme. So again, I'm going to give you a minute to work through this question all on your own. The key thing that I want you to pay attention to here is the great patterns in the answer choices. So tackle the differences in the patterns and the answer choices one by one, eliminate as you go, and then you'll see that your process to the correct answer is much, much faster. So take 1 minute to do question 2 on your own. Welcome back, welcome back. So hopefully you had enough time to work through this question. If you were a little bit slow, I will say that maybe even for myself, I would have taken just a smidge longer than a minute just because of the length of the answer choices. But remember my tip, notice the patterns in the answer choices and work through them one by one. So here is something that is probably pretty familiar. You've got the reaction for photosynthesis here, this time nicely balanced, which I didn't do earlier. And it tells us it requires chlorophyll. So you should be thinking, got it. I already know this stuff, skip. Okay, so this question is asking which of the following best explains what occurs during this reaction? This is what I call a very vague and open question. Which of the following generally tends to be anything or many things can be true about the answer choices. So you want to make sure you scan the answer choices to figure out what it is that this question is really looking for, what best explains. So if I take a look, carbon dioxide, I see patterns like reduction, oxidation, and then the reverse process of water, right? So this is one set of pattern. Carbon dioxide and water undergoing certain kinds of reactions, reduction and oxidation. And then it says it's made glucose as a primary energy source and oxygen is released as a byproduct. So that is another set of patterns. And then here in the bottom two, it's reverse, right? Oxygen is made as a primary food source and glucose is released as a byproduct. Same deal. Now, let's say you're like, Ari, that sounds awfully chemistry-like. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? I was here for AP Bio. Now, the cool thing about science is that we have imposed these limits or these lines, drawn these lines between topics, but science does not work that way. Science is meant to be understood kind of as a bigger picture. And so you're going to get a lot of crossover, even when we're trying to limit it to one topic. Oxidation reduction is a topic that is technically in Gen Chem, but that's okay. We can work with this. We can even figure out what this means, and maybe you'll learn a little bit of chemistry at the same time. Okay, so let's think about this. Let's say you're like, I'm not even taking chemistry. I don't know what's going on there. let's think about the other half of this. In the process, let's look at the second half of these answer choices. Is it that we are making glucose as the primary food source for plants and oxygen is released as gas? Or are plants using oxygen as their food source and glucose is a byproduct? What do you think? I want you to think about that and tell me, is glucose the food or is oxygen the food for plants? I've got a hunch on this. If you don't know, they are technically both products in the process of photosynthesis, right? So they're both on the right side of our reaction, but one of them is the actual thing we need, or plants need, theirs, and then oxygen, or no, the other one, the other one is going to be your garbage, your byproduct, the thing that you don't really want to use anymore. So if you're thinking, glucose sounds like a pretty good food source, I kind of like my glucose. Well, plants do too. Plants do. The reason why they do all this is to create glucose. And so just based on that alone, you can work down this fairly intimidating looking question to 2 answer choices, right? Look, we're out. C and D is out, and you're left with a 50-50. Glucose is a primary food source. Oxygen is released as a byproduct. Plants have it pretty good. They're pretty smart, even though, you know, we might not think so. We use them a lot, but oxygen is actually super, super toxic. Yeah, actually, you got it right. You got it right. Think about this. Glucose is the food source. Plants do release oxygen as a byproduct, and they totally have it right. You guys all heard of the term things like antioxidants? Antioxidants, if you break down that word, it's anti, like against, oxygen, right? And if you think about that, well, a lot of people will eat foods that are rich in antioxidants. So things like coffee or chocolate, dark chocolate there is, and a bunch of other yummy foods. I think blueberries also fall into that thing. My mom always wants to push antioxidants on me. And I'm like, do you actually know what it is that you're asking me to eat here? And it's good because it soaks up all these oxygens that are, we call them free radicals. They do a lot of damage in our bodies. So even though we rely on oxygen, we cannot live without oxygen, we have essentially taken advantage of all this excess oxygen that our plants give off. So it is totally a byproduct, and it is actually kind of like a scary thing that can do a lot of damage inside our body if it's not controlled very well. Okay, so let's think. So we've got our 2 to 2. If you were in this situation, you're like, I do not have time to figure out what oxidation reduction means. You pick between the 2 and you move on. You don't even take a second glance at it. You cut it as a loss because at least you've got it to a 50-50. Spend your time on questions that you can do. But oh my, Molly, I will join you with my coffee right now then. Let's look at what reduction and oxidation means. Let's say we'll hold off on reduction. We'll hold off on a reduction and consider what oxidation. Oxidation is, as the name implies, is adding bonds to oxygen. Let's think about this. Water looks like this, right? I know we're doing bio, but I promise this is relevant. We've got 1 oxygen molecule and 2 bonds to hydrogen. That oxygen in water is not really oxidized. In order for you to oxidize it, you cut off bonds to hydrogen and you add in bonds to oxygen, and you form something that looks like this, O2. And this is a really good example of oxidation. Water being oxidized to produce O2 is a true fact. I am adding bonds to oxygen. If you think about this, well, then what does reduction mean? I'm reducing the bonds to oxygen. So if I consider CO2, and then I'm going to create glucose, C6H12, O6, well, CO2 looks like this. I've got lots of bonds to oxygen, whereas glucose, I'm not going to draw it out, but clearly you can see there's a lot more hydrogens in glucose than there are in carbon dioxide. This is a process of reduction. Now, there's a lot more chemistry behind this. This is a thing that our bodies take advantage of, actually. But the process of oxidation reduction is an energy source. This is why we do this. And the process by which we create macromolecules like glucose, like how it's occurring in plants is taken advantage of because there's a lot of energy kind of stored in something like glucose. So the correct answer, as you guys probably all figured out by now, if you haven't already picked it, is answer choice A. So carbon dioxide is going reduction, water is going under oxidation, glucose is the food, and oxygen is that nasty byproduct. So A is the correct answer here. Okay. So let's move on. We'll do another question on macromolecules. This one I really like. I don't know if you can tell, but I really do like chemistry. But chemistry is cool because it explains a lot of what happens in biology. So I'm going to give you another minute to work through this question all on your own. When we come back, we'll talk about the science behind question 3 together. Okay, team, come on back. Let's see what we all did for question 3. I'm not gonna lie, Hannah, I'm a biochemist, so I feel like I've got like my feet in both worlds, and it's the best part of it all. So we were talking about ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and it is synthesized from ADP according to the following reaction. You can see it below. Now, let's say you've never really seen this reaction before, and that's okay. Again, use the words to figure it out. If you think about what D means, well, D just means 2 because it stands for di. And 3 is tri, right? This is tri. So ADP, if I add in another phosphate, I've got adenosine triphosphate. Now let's like, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background to why ATP is so important. You've probably heard a lot about ATP and how it's like the energy currency of your body, and it's a powerhouse, made by the powerhouse of your cell, right? But why is that? Why is ATP so energy, stuffed? Like, what about it is? And really, behind all cool chemistry concepts is physics. It is. Let's think about this. Phosphate has actually a lot of negative charges on them. And I'm not going to draw these again. There's like a bunch of oxygens in here, but just trust me, it's got a bunch of negative charges. If I have 3 of them, what do you think? Is this a stable configuration? If I put a bunch of negative charges in really, really close proximity, is this something that's going to want to like explode apart, or is it like happy? Negative charges want to hang out with other negative charges. What do you think? So it's kind of like, having a bunch of like, the same kind of magnets close together. You have to like physically push them. Like with, if it's one of those cool, like, oh man, one of those rare metal ones. We have some upstairs. I can't remember what they're called now, but like the really nice ones, not like the fridge magnets, but the really, really nice ones that people are buying these days. They're really strong. I was pretty impressed. And so you have to actually put in a lot of effort to put together 2 like magnets in close proximity. It's really the same deal here. Like charges don't like being next to each other. So if you put them in a configuration where they're kind of like very tenuously hanging on like this, there's a lot of energy here. And when I, cut one of these guys off, I use my ATP, the product there is going to be ADP. The reverse then is the other way, right? If I have ADP and I add in another negative charge there, it's not going to want to happen. So that's really the crux of what this question is asking here. We've got a free energy diagram. And if you've never heard of Gibbs, Gibbs is just a measure. That little triangle just means delta. The change in Gibbs is a measure of spontaneity. Spontaneity. spontaneous, right? So if you have a negative Gibbs, that is a negative process. It is a spontaneous process here. So if it is non-spontaneous though, I promise I know how to spell spontaneous. There we go. That is a positive Gibbs. So if you take a look at our graph, this is just like, the x-axis is time, you got a change in Gibbs free energy at the bottom. Let's think. If I'm on this hill, and I haven't been outside in a long time because it's been pretty snowy and icy where I am. Is this something I have to expend energy to do, or is that something that's just going to naturally occur? Like I don't have to put in energy to be able to walk up that giant hill. Well, I mean, even just looking at that curve with the stick diagram makes me not want to go there, wherever this is. Maybe it's like San Francisco. I don't want to do this. This is a really, really high curve. It's going to take me a lot of energy to get up that curve. But let's say I'm like way at the top. I'm like, wee, I'm sliding down, right? Easy to do. I don't have to expend energy to fall down the curve. That's essentially what this curve is telling us. When you have a Gibbs free energy diagram like this one, a free energy diagram, anything that is going up is non-spontaneous. Anything goes sliding down is then a spontaneous process. In order to calculate your Gibbs free energy, all you got to do is start and end, right? And so if this is an increase, your reactants is at a lower Gibbs free energy than your products, this is what we call a non-spontaneous process, okay? It's non-spontaneous. Now, if you take a look at your answer choices though, we've got terms that don't talk about spontaneity, and that's okay. We can work on this. We can work on this. It says things like endergonic and exergonic, and then it talks about energy being released or absorbed. Well, what do you think? If I have to start a reactant where it's low energy and I add in some energy to get my product in this case, well, it is not being released, it is being absorbed. So use the patterns in the answer choices. Give yourself that 50-50 and get rid of answer choices A and D because it is being absorbed in the process. I start at a lower energy, I end up at a higher energy, energy must then be absorbed. So what does this ender and exer mean? Let's use a little bit of word roots to figure this out. You've heard of terms, let's say exer, like, I don't know, exothermic, maybe exothermic, right? And endothermic. I promise I do this. There you go. Exothermic, endothermic is not the same thing as endergonic and exergonic, but they have similar roots to them. If I have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like our body. Like if we run around, you get kind of hot. That's because the breakdown of glucose to form ATP and then the ATP being used as an exothermic process. It's giving off. Nice, Beryl, exergonic, energy is exiting. And I want to be a little bit more specific here. The G is a good way to remember Gibbs, right? This is about spontaneity. So an endergonic process means you have to put in energy in order for this thing to run. It is non-spontaneous. So endergonic means non-spontaneous. Exergonic means it is spontaneous, right? It is actually not the same thing as exothermic and endothermic. It is a very common point of confusion. Exothermic just means it is releasing heat as the reaction goes on. Endothermic means it takes in heat. Heat and spontaneity, two different things. They are often related, but they are two different things. So all of that to say, the correct answer for this question is answer choice C. The formation of ATP is endergonic. So it takes in energy and energy is absorbed during the process. So Nicole, all standardized tests will actually take advantage of 50-50s. Now the distribution of how many of those happen kind of depends on the test. I will say science tests do a lot of the 50-50 kind of patterns in the answer choices. And when you spot them, that is a really, really good clue to take advantage of, just like as this one, okay? So moving on, we got another question. Again, we're going to hang in the side of biological molecules just for a little bit longer. Here is a question on elements And notice here, this is a Roman numeral question. So here's my favorite Roman numeral strategy before I let you loose on the question. Roman numeral questions very often will have Roman numerals that appear in a certain kind of frequency. So Roman numerals that appear twice should be approached first. Why? Because if you do a Roman numeral that appears twice, then either you can eliminate it or verify, and just with one Roman numeral alone, you're brought to a 50-50. So I'll show you how cool this actually works after I've given you a chance to do that. But that's your pro tip for this question, Roman numeral questions. Tackle the Roman numeral that appears twice first. So I'll see you back in 1 minute. Come on back, everyone. Let's take a look at how you approach this question, including the handy dandy Roman numeral strategy. We have an example of a bacteria that is isolated from a sample of a river water. So Rio Tinto is a river, it's got some water. Researchers are determining the rate of synthesis of some compounds found in that bacteria from the water, and then contrasted that to some nutrient-rich water, which is shown in the graph below. So when you see data, when you see graphs like this one, I do want you to take just a couple of seconds and analyze what this information is telling you. You have 4 different kind of macromolecules as indicated on the x-axis. You have 2 different water sources, and then the y-axis, which is your dependent variable, is measuring how much of those macromolecules you're producing. So I want you to think about this. What part of the graph are you going to pay attention to? What part is like your eyes are immediately like, I'm going to draw, like I'm going to look right at that part, because it's very likely that the question is going to make sure I understand the difference as to why that part of the graph is important. So what do you think? What part of this graph are you going to pay the most attention to, and therefore will likely be the focus of what this question is going to ask you about? So the parts that I always think about is differences, right? Things that are the same when you change a variable aren't super, super interesting. It doesn't mean that it can't be a part of what the question is testing, but it's likely going to look for the differences. So if I consider here, well, carbohydrates have fairly similar levels between the two rivers. Same thing with proteins. Lipids, there's a little bit of an increase when I've got my nutrient rich, but man, is the difference between nucleic acids in the 2 river sources very different, right? So based on the results below, which of the following elements is most likely deficient in the river? Really what this question is asking, it is what's special, like which of the 3 of these elements is special with nucleic acids? Okay, with that in mind, you could actually identify, or let's say you're like, I don't feel like I know quite enough about this. Don't give up. Don't just pick your lucky answer and move on. You want to think, well, what can I do instead? Don't think about what you can't do. Think about what you do know and what you can do. So think about my Roman numeral strategy. Go ahead and tell me what Roman numeral only appears twice. So I want you to take a look at A, B, C, and D and tell me which Roman numeral just appears twice. This is the first thing I do whenever I see a Roman numeral question is which one appears twice. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes they all appear equally. Some of them, sometimes, you know, yeah, sometimes I don't get that pattern, but very often I do. So let's look. Well, Roman numeral 1 appears in A and D, so that appears twice. Same thing with Roman numeral 3, that appears in C and D. Roman numeral 2, though, appears in 3 different places. So I'm not going to approach that one. It's probably going to be right, actually. But let's do Roman numeral 1. Okay, so Roman numeral 1 says carbon. So carbon is the foundational molecule of pretty much all of our biological macromolecules. And if it was deficient, so sure, we could totally do Roman numeral 3. I will admit, you could either go Roman numeral 1 or Roman numeral 3. Either one will totally work. I've just, for the purpose of this discussion, chosen Roman numeral 1 to do first. So carbon is a basis for pretty much everything. And so if carbon was deficient in these two, in the Rio Tinto River versus a nutrient-rich river, would I see the same pattern? Well, remember, like if you think about carbon, which is C6, I'm going to do this over and over again, H12O6. Well, if I had not enough carbon in my Rio Tinto, I'm fairly certain I should see a difference in those two line values. And that's not what we're seeing. So carbon is okay. And therefore, take a look at what we can do. Get rid of Roman numeral A, Roman numeral 1 and answer choice A and D. Look at what we have here. Which one don't we have to analyze? Roman numeral 2, which is phosphorus, appears twice in both of them. So you don't have to do it at all. So all you got to do in order for you to answer this question is figure out, is Roman numeral 3 a part of a deficiency between those two river sources? And then you move on. On test day, you don't do more work than you absolutely need to. Roman numeral 2 has to be true. Don't spend time analyzing it. In our review, we will talk about why phosphorus is necessarily going to be deficient here. But on test day, you don't bother doing that, okay? So Roman numeral 3, let's take a look. Nitrogen. Nitrogen does not exist in carbohydrates. I know that for at least the vast majority of carbohydrates. So, you know, if I was deficient in nitrogen, it wouldn't affect carbohydrate levels. And so that part's okay. Now, nitrogen is a pretty big component of proteins. If you've had a chance to study some of the proteins and amino acids, it's called amino for a reason, because nitrogen is essentially the foundation from how amino acids link together to form your proteins. This is why it's important that you eat meat in order for you to gain muscle mass, is because meat is muscle, muscles is protein, proteins are based out of amino acid compounds. And because of the fact that nitrogen, so protein levels are the same in both of those rivers, well, that's probably okay as well, right? So just based on that alone, C is out and B is our winner. B is our winner. We didn't even have to analyze Roman numeral 2 to be able to get this question right. And that is why strategy is really important when you're going through standardized tests like AP Bio, okay? So what if, let's say in your review, let's talk about why phosphorus is the way it is in this graph. Well, if you've been studying nucleic acids and macromolecules, tell me what part of nucleic acids has to do with phosphate. What part of it? We've kind of already a little bit, tiny bit of it talked about it, because I don't know if you know, but ADP is adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine is one of those nucleic, nucleotides that is one of the foundations. So ATGC, A stands for adenosine, or adenine, sorry. So all of those nucleic acids are actually joined by phosphodiester bond. So the relevance here is that if your environment around you is deficient in phosphate, I'm not going to be able to form as many nucleic acids as I can, because that is like, just like nitrogen is essential for linking amino acids together to make proteins, phosphates are really essential for linking nucleic acids together. So that's why Roman numeral 2, phosphorus, is the correct answer. Lipids, actually, there's a fair number of lipids like sphingomyelin, and you don't have to know that, but there are lipids out there that have phosphocholine backbones. And so that's why lipids have a small difference in the two river sources, but it's a key component of nucleic acids for sure. Okay. Nitrogen. Yeah, so Molly, yeah, that's a great point. And I totally kind of missed that. It does. You're absolutely correct. And if nitrogen was the reason, then for sure, nucleic acids, the nitrogen here is also a really important component. But because it doesn't show up in the protein part, you would say it can't, the drop in the difference between those two bars is not due to nitrogen. right? Because the protein bars are the same. But that's a really good follow-up, Molly. I really love the connection you made there. Awesome job. Okay. Thinking like scientists. I love it. Okay, so let's take a look. We're gonna do another question. This one's, we're gonna kind of shift away from macromolecules. We're gonna talk about origins of life problems. This is a really long question. I'm gonna give you a little bit more time for question 5. So let's take 1.5 minutes for question 5. The key tip here, and for questions like this one in the future, notice again, we have patterns in our answer choices. When you have a really long question stem like this one, it's like a whole paragraph on its own. I want you to scan down to the actual question being asked and then kind of work backwards. When you have an idea of what the question is asking for, you're not going to have to filter through as much of that stuff that's above it. Okay, so 1.5 minutes for question 5, all on your own. When we come back, we'll talk through it together. Okay, come on back. So Kaylin has a really, really good question. How much time should you be spending on AP Bio questions? And now the answer will differ based on the question. So some of the questions, you can speed up your time. I would say it's pretty feasible to do it in about a minute. Longer questions like this one, give yourself a bit more time. And by banking, like going through like some of the more straightforward questions a little bit faster, you can bank a bit of additional time for questions like this one. It's pretty tough to say because a lot of the AP Bio questions are like monster questions. So don't feel like you have to force yourself to do that in 1 minute, but just be a little bit careful with your time management and get that practice in. Doing a lot of practice tests for tests like this one will give you a sense of the pacing that you need and whether you should be slowing down or speeding up. But roughly between 1 to 2 minutes per question is on par for the majority of the questions. For multiple choice, for the free response questions, definitely it's a bit longer there. Okay. So hopefully you took some of the tips from what I said a little bit earlier. Don't stress about trying to read all of the questions really, really fast, but take advantage of like reading the actual question and then heading back up to the beginning, keeping in mind the patterns and the answer choices. So the actual question says, according to Darwin's theory of natural selection, which group of individuals most likely had the highest fitness? If I scan the answer choices, it says either male lizards or female lizards, and then it says it's either resembling or a different color from their background. And clearly that is all referring to this graph. Now, before I even like read the question, that the little like paragraph above it, like let's look at the graph. Let's look at the graph. Our graph is saying we have males and female lizards, and then our y-axis says proportion survivors, and then we got match versus mismatched. Now, here's like a little tip. When you see error bars like these ones, and the error bars overlap, it means what about the difference between those two? If you have dots and their error bars overlap like this, it means that the difference between those two dots are not important. They're not significant. So you can functionally treat them as they're the same rough value. However, if I take a look over here, I have error bars that do not overlap, and it means that the difference between them are actually statistically significant. You don't have to calculate the significance. You just got to pay attention to whether or not those differences are real according to statistics. So since the differences are real at the end when I'm mismatched, and it's clear that the females win over here with the lizards, well, I'm fairly certain that the correct answer has to do something with either males are not living as well when the mismatch is there, or females are living better when they are mismatched, okay? So with that in mind, the significant part of the data here is about the mismatching and how the females are outliving the males when they're mismatched. Now let's head back up to the question. So sand lizards vary in their color, which is an adaptation. They live, those living in lighter environments blend better. Darker colorations are better and darker. Makes sense, right? If you can't spot the lizard, nothing's going to eat it. Researchers then used some paint to color the backs, and they either made them match their background or mismatch their background. Oh, so they essentially deliberately place them in a way that they can control for the matching versus mismatching. And then they essentially, found them again, the ones that were still alive after 16 days. So, I mean, I didn't really learn a lot new from that paragraph. I could speed it up a bit because I have all I needed actually from the data. Data says females do better when they're mismatched and than the males. Boom. Okay. So according to Darwin's theory of natural selection, there's a pretty good assumption here, right? Assumption is that the males and females reproduce at the same rate. And that's important because when you are thinking about Darwin's theory, the two big considerations are whether they're able to reproduce and whether they're able to survive, right? So the reproduction is the same rate. That means that's not a consideration, at least for this part of the question. It's all about the survival. So the correct answer here, so much fluff. Female lizards painted a different color from the background had highest fitness. Duh, right? The answer, the graph kind of just gave that to us. You didn't really need the majority of this question stem. Save yourself that agony on test day, filter out the unimportant stuff, and really ask yourself, what is this data telling me? And then you move on. You pick it and you move on, okay? So just to be clear, I'm not saying to skip the question, skip the big paragraph. A lot of times that is important information, but it's not all important. And having a focus for what you're looking for will give you better direction as to, oh, I don't need that information. Oh, this is totally something I need in order to answer that question. Okay, so let's do some more questions of that note. We got another one. It's pretty long, just like last time. This time, other than the birds adapt, all the answer choices are a little bit different. So you don't have any cool patterns to take advantage of, but I think that tip about the long question stem definitely applies here. We've got a huge paragraph for a question. So again, let's take 1 minute to do this question, write down your answer, and then we will compare some notes together. Last question here. Let's take a look at how you all did. Again, remember to start with the actual question at the end. Which of the following scenarios most plausibly occurs? Thanks. I don't have a lot to go with then. Something has to be supported by all this stuff in the first part of the question. No cool patterns in the answer choices. Well, we got to start from scratch. We got to do it the way we would probably normally want to do a question like this one. So right from the beginning. So we have a bird, has got some notable traits, each trait depending on a gene with 2 alleles. Seems kind of Mendelian, right? One allele is completely dominant, the other one is completely recessive. Okay, well, this looks kind of familiar now that I'm reading it. Brown or red, small or big, sturdy beak, delicate beak, depending on whether they inherited a mutation from a gene. They can have long feathers or short feathers. Sounds awfully like Darwin's finches, doesn't it? All we needed to know is that the traits are dependent on one gene with 2 versions of it. One of them is dominant, the other one is completely recessive. There's no in between here. There's no like incomplete dominance or anything. So that's it. That's all we can determine from this question stem. Then let's take a look at the answer choices and see which one is supported by all this. Oh, I totally love that, Nicole. Yeah, I'm a big note taker. I'm completely honest. I will take notes. And so some of my big takeaways that I've been stating for you are things that I quickly jot down as I read. And then it forces me to keep those in mind as I go through the answer choices, because sometimes I forget what the question is asking. I've definitely done that a lot in multiple choice questions. I remember the question in A and B. By the time I get to C, I've forgotten what the question's asking and I'm just picking true facts. So if you were like that, and like me with really long question stems like this, definitely take advantage of some scratch paper, take down a couple of notes. Just don't let it slow you down. And if you are rewriting whole question stems, if it's taking you more than 2 minutes to go through a question, likely you're gonna have to pull back on that. So be very careful with how much time you spend doing that. But I really like that tip. That's a good idea. Yeah, okay. A, the birds adapt to an increase in canopy cover by evolving feathers, intermediate in color between red and brown. Now, the first part, I'm like, that seems, I guess you could evolve feathers, but this word intermediate makes me take pause. We have complete dominance and complete recessiveness. Intermediacy is not something that is supported by the question stem. A is out. Let's get rid of that guy. B, the birds adapt to colder environments by losing their feathers and developing fur. Isn't that like a trait of birds? Aren't birds supposed to have feathers and not fur? Adaptation is not, like, first of all, that's not supported by the question. We have no idea what kind of bird this is. And then secondly, it's not something that birds do. They just don't like magically throw off their feathers and put on a fur coat. That's not how birds work. So B is implausible and not supported. C, the birds adapt to a new diet by developing a beak that resembles that of seed eaters, but that is very delicate. So it's like both, right? The beak in the question stem has either sturdy or delicate, and the question did say that these traits are one or the other. You can't have anything in between. So C is wrong for the same reason that A was wrong. It's not, there's no intermediate thing in there. D is the correct answer. It isn't necessarily true. Let's say why. The birds adapt to become smaller in order to exploit new food sources that require them to enter small crevices. So that makes sense, right? There are those alleles that exist in the population of birds, and selection pressure will essentially force one over the other. So D is supported and is our correct answer for our last question of the day. Okay, so I want to just take like 1 minute and just quickly review some things with you, not like content things, but like, how are you studying for this? Are you a flashcard person? Are you somebody who takes notes? Are you somebody who just reads a lot of books? I will all encourage you to use questions to help you figure out what you're missing. Right? It's really boring just reading textbooks. I despise just reading textbooks, but it's actually way more interesting, more fun, more engaging when you use questions and spend a bit of time in review. In our hour together, we didn't actually cover a lot of questions, but hopefully you got a lot of content out of it, and you figured out what you do know and what you don't know. And then we also worked in some strategies that you're going to be able to take advantage of on test day. So I really want you to do something like that. I want you to get your hands on a source of questions, be comprehensive in your review, and then use that takeaway to feed it forward into future questions and future practice. So we'll be back here tomorrow. We're going to do some cell and bacteria and a question on viruses. And so I do encourage you all to come back here tomorrow, same time. And just like today, we did some US history as well as world history that will be happening prior to this session. Tell your friends and come hang out with us tomorrow. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for all your participation, and thank as well to the fabulous Nick for his fantastic recaps. And I will see you hopefully back here tomorrow.